I could be wrong. Lord knows it isn't the first time and won't be the last time. Pretty sure all 30 teams knew the 2023 MLB trade deadline was August 1st, as far back as the December winter meetings. So why are two AL contenders, the York Yankees and Houston Astros, still dragging their feet less than 2 weeks before D-Day? And why are the Chicago White Sox holding on to pieces they don't really want around anymore? What are they waiting for? Time to redeem those rain checks from the first half and enjoy all the best views every weekend on AL/Lines, a Slasher Sports Baseball podcast available on Spotify, as well as our YouTube channel. I'm your wrinkled yet wise host, Steve Beck. But the goal is to make each of you a regular co-host. So let us know what you think on Twitter at SlasherBaseball. Send us emails with your comments and future show suggestions, SlasherBaseball@yahoo.com. Better yet, join our new Slasher Sports community on Discord. Baseball news, college sports, cinema, lifestyle. We have something for everyone, including a Redbubble shop for some pretty cool merchandise. Thanks to everyone who commented on last week's /lines. This podcast is all about keeping the conversations going, even the misdirected ones. I just wanted to take a moment here to kind of give a little story about some of the frustrations, but also some of the joys of having a podcast like this. We actually had a listener tweet their dissatisfaction with my takes on the Athletics move to Las Vegas, probably in 2025, which is fine. I don't want everybody to agree with me. I want you to think about the things I say, but you need to make up your own mind whether I'm an idiot, whether I'm a dope, whether I have no idea what I'm talking about. I mean, that's up to you guys. But somehow, at Blue Slant, I'll even give him a shout out, even though I'm not sure I want to promote whatever site he was coming from. But at Blue Slant picked out a tongue-in-cheek line from the entire 48 minutes of content that we put out in our initial episode and tried to paint AL/Lines as a tool for some right-wing conspiracy. And again, I don't care if you call me clueless. If you think I'm an idiot, call me an idiot, but at least explain to me why I'm an idiot. But for the record, the point that I made, and it was only just an aside, is that government regulations doomed every single stadium project the A's tried to put together in order to stay in the East Bay, to stay in Oakland. That was their ultimate goal all along. And the same can be said what was happening, within the political schemes of the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, to the Giants decades earlier. Before they got their new stadium, I mean, they almost moved a couple times because they could not get everybody on board. There was always some regulation or some little T that needed to be crossed or I needed to be dotted in order to get the stadium done. And quite often it was really just selfish and thinly veiled ways to not get the stadium built because people had certain feelings about public money being spent on stadiums and sports teams and whatever. And again, that's a valid viewpoint to have. But again, this is just a baseball podcast. This isn't Meet the Press, folks. Okay. Okay. And we want you to join these conversations. We want to know your viewpoints, but don't mistake this for anything other than a podcast about American League Baseball in 2023. That's all this really is. We're not trying to be smarter than anyone or show off, what we know about analytics or whatever the topic might be. We want to have conversations with fellow baseball fans and people just interested in the concept of baseball and just have a good time together, have great discussions. That's all we want. There's no hidden agenda here. So hopefully the comments coming in this week and in future weeks will be more about American League Baseball and less about perceived. I don't know what the perception was there, but again, I appreciate all of the comments were there. I even appreciate at Blue Slant for putting it out there. I mean, it's when I'm wrong, I'll be the first to admit that I'm wrong. But in this case, what I said was dead on, and there was no intent to influence or misguide baseball fans or listeners to the podcast. It's a fact what happened there in Oakland. It's sad. It still saddens me to think that the Oakland A's will no longer be playing in Oakland, that they're going to really, I guess, flip-flop with their minor league team. Ideally, I'd love to see a AAA team then go back to Oakland, since the AAA team is in Las Vegas, have it move to Oakland. But, that's still to be determined in future years and future episodes at AL Slash Lines. We're going to lead off our conversation this week about the AL in 2023 by following the sun. Going to go from east to west, including a stop in the Central. And before I ask the question that I posed in the intro about the three front offices and ask them, what are you waiting for going into this trade deadline? I want to give kudos to the Baltimore Orioles, who moved into first place this past Thursday evening for the first time this year. They passed the Tampa Bay Rays. They're in first place all by themselves. And the reason, not only does it deserve a lot of applause and a lot of standing outs for what the Orioles have done, not only completely rebuilding their organization and their future fortunes, but also keeping pace with the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays were on a historic pace early on. I think they were 30-9 at one particular point. But the other thing I want to talk about is that why do baseball fans feel the urge to write off a baseball season after only a month or after only 6 weeks? I mean, what the Rays did early deserved just as loud applause as what the Orioles have done, catching up and now passing the Rays. But, why is every game either a championship that still has to be determined in the fall, or, the end of the world as we know it for our team? It's a long season for a reason. That's what makes MLB baseball and professional baseball in general that much more unique and that much more fun to follow. You can have a bad month, get yourself back into the race. You can keep pace with a team on a historic pace and still be able to catch them as the season wears on. Things don't really, they're not on a stopwatch, except going into the trading deadline. And that's really the main topic of this week's podcast. What are they waiting for? The New York Yankees, Chicago White Sox, the Houston Astros, for varying reasons, but to a certain degree, there's the same sense of urgency. These three teams shouldn't be waiting. They shouldn't still be on the clock trying to make a draft pick. Okay, they need to pull the trigger, make deals, and set the market prices early. Perhaps force your competitors to make mistakes or be rash and overpay on trades that are executed after the ones that you make early. Okay, that's a competitive advantage that you have. I know a lot of people say, oh, but no one really knows what's going on in front offices and what conversations are being had. I've had this debate on podcasts for years now. Ultimately, you control your own destiny. If you're a general manager, you control your destiny. Just because tradition or what's worked in the past has worked then, It does not mean it's going to work in the current environment. Every baseball season is a little bit different. Who had the Reds and the Marlins as contenders? Who had the Rays and Orioles on a pace that could still be historic at this point? Who had the Yankees in last place? Who had the Astros behind the Rangers? There's so many things that happen that no matter how much discussion there is in the offseason, no matter how many analytical theories and formulas are put out there for consumer digestion and fan application, ultimately the games get decided on the field. And by this time, by after the All-Star break, the final 2 weeks of July, things have been decided. I mean, races are decided now. Teams go from contenders to pretenders or to sellers. People that are in contention need to make trades for a variety of reasons. It's never the same reason. Injuries are a big deal. But the three teams we're talking about now, their holes and their situations have been apparent since Memorial Day, let alone leading up to the trade deadline day. Okay. And I think in the case of the first team we're going to talk about, the New York Yankees, everybody knew that they were going to have two pretty big needs. The Yankees are in last place in the AL East. That's a reality that fans in the other 14 AL cities are probably celebrating. But one GM, Brian Cashman, does not seem to prepare to accept it. I mean, his own manager this week, Aaron Boone, even admitted, we stink right now. That doesn't mean that the Yankees are going to stink down the stretch. There's a possibility that they could if they don't make some corrections here. But the Yankees and GM Brian Cashman, they're getting asked the question first, what are you waiting for? And it's obvious to me that question has to be asked of the Yankees front office and probably to many of you as well. The Yankees now need to play themselves into a wild card spot over the next 2 months. And the most dire needs they have now, one created because of an injury, the other due to bad personnel decisions, really, spending money places that perhaps they might have been more wise to spend in other places. They've all been known since actually probably before Memorial Day. And in the case of the outfield bat situation, the hole in the lineup that's there, 90% of Yankee fans and media outlets knew this was an issue even before spring training sites opened. Now, as far as the catching goes, the injury to Jose Trevino has exposed Kyle Higashioka to some extent, so they need to add a catcher. I mean, Higashioka is I think he's a fine receiver. He frames pitches well. I don't know that he's an everyday catcher, if there's such thing anymore as an everyday catcher. I mean, basically, teams need two catchers for the most part because of the demands of the position, and especially the physical demands of the position. I mean, injuries are going to happen, so you need to get two catchers. So you need to go out and get a catcher. And it's different when injuries hit around the All-Star break. You can understand why a front office hasn't made a move yet. But injury happened, the last week of June, first week of July. Okay, they're still scrambling a bit and trying to figure, okay, all right, let's see what we have, what can we move, what is out there. Let's kind of see how some other pieces fall into place. That's okay. But what in the wild, wild world of sports are the Yankees waiting for? Now, the Yankees were 35-25, 10 games above 500 before the toe injury to Aaron Judge. So there is reason to hope that his return stops this skid. I mean, those are valid hopes. But the scenario from the old Bugs Bunny cartoon where Bugs batted in every lineup spot is not a valid hope or not a valid approach to it. It's not all going to be Aaron Judge's doing, as wonderful and as impactful as a player as Aaron Judge is, that's going to get this team into a wild card spot. The division now is out of reach. And it's out of reach for everybody except Baltimore and Tampa Bay, in all honesty. The team is already over the top tier of the luxury tax. So you can't even say, oh, gee, we don't want to go over to the next tier. They're already over. So as the hole has grown deeper, the Yankees, if they're not careful, will be digging their own graves here. And now it's crunch time. And there are more teams, many of them unexpected contenders, out there competing for the same players. It's not like the Yankees can just flex their financial muscles and overwhelm everyone else. They're already above the top tier of the luxury tax. They need to not only rectify that situation, and then with some of the free agent to be contracts coming off the books, that's going to get them below that top threshold. But they need to also buoy their chances to earn a wild card spot and then see how the playoffs play off for them. Gleyber Torres is probably the most intriguing piece the Yankees have. He's never going to live up to the expectations that Yankee fans have had for him. Were they realistic expectations? In my opinion, not. But he certainly has shown moments that, boy, they're going to break out. He's going to break out, and he's going to be an impact player in this lineup. They have let people go or traded people away in order to give Gleyber Torres an opportunity. But Gleyber Torres is probably your typical change of scenery trade candidate. He can be a centerpiece of a move to bring in a Cody Bellinger from the Cubs or Randall Grichuk from the Rockies, maybe even Dylan Carlson from St. Louis. The pot will need to be sweetened from the prospect pools, and the Yankees have some interesting mid-level prospects that, do they want to let them go? No. But if they put them in a trade that's going to get them a playoff spot financially, historically, for a team that anything less than a World Series is a failure, you're going to reap benefits that way. So Brian Cashman, go out and set the market. I'm going to compare you to the skipper of a deep sea fishing boat. If you strike early and can get your catch back to the docks and back to the marketplace first, and it's quality fish, then you are setting the market price. You're going to cash in early and often, while the people behind you that took their time getting to port or weren't as successful as you were are scrambling just to break even. Remember that you can hurt division rivals just as badly by increasing their trade costs by setting the market and acting first. You think that the Yankees wouldn't love it if the Rays and the Jays and the O's are having to overpay for upgrades to keep them in front of the Yankees and in playoff spots? Red Sox, the same thing. The Yankees have a lot of interesting pieces that may not seem as valuable when you look at the stats, but in these change of scenery scenarios, it could bring, it could make a difference. Not only for the players you're trading and the teams you're trading them to, but to your own team as far as your return. Luis Severino, he's having a bad year, but he's Luis Severino. When teams that are on the cusp, let's say a Cubs over in the National League or in the American League, let's say, the Tigers or the Red Sox or even the Angels. If you're on that cusp of being able to perhaps bring in pieces and start dreaming of 2024, Luis Severino is that kind of piece. That's the kind of piece that you want to gamble on. And certainly it would help bring the Yankees closer to dropping down a tier when it comes to the luxury tax situation. Wandy Peralta, he's the kind of flexible veteran arm that not only if you move him, you're going to again further reduce your obligations under the luxury tax ceilings. He could bring you in a catcher and some major league ready pieces. Again, you have to package them with something. I mean, you can't just say, Wandy Peralta is this, or Luis Severino is this, Gleyber Torres is this. You might need to sweeten it. And wait, there's more. That's the kind of approach that if you go out and strike early, you can do this, and you're helping yourself in the long run. Because the Yankees love to dabble in free agency. That's just what the Yankees do. And everything I'm throwing out here, these are all theoreticals. I mean, Gleyber Torres, his name has come up a lot. Would he be a wonderful gamble for the Colorado Rockies to add if they're going to bring in Randall Grichuk? Absolutely. Does he kind of fit the profile for the Cubs and the Cardinals, or Bellinger or Dylan Carlson or one of their other outfielders and outfield pieces? Yes. I think it's obvious that he is that kind of player. But the pitchers we're talking about here, there should be really very few untouchables at this point. Even guys that are helping the Yankees in subtle ways, maybe not in the stat sheet, Kiner Falefa, DJ LeMahieu. I mean, there are all kind of players that could help, could be a throw-in sort of a piece to help your salary situation, but also get the piece that you need to bring in to get yourself into that wild card spot. The Yankees can afford to gamble and pay short term if the front office truly believes that there's enough talent on this roster to earn that wild card spot. The only reason Cashman waits for potential last-minute markdowns is unspoken, except for behind closed doors in the front offices, doubts that the team can't turn it around. And in all honesty, if I was in Brian Cashman's chair, I may be having those type of thoughts, and I would have been having them even earlier in the season. But the Yankee fans and the Yankee owners aren't going to settle for, well, let's just, pack this year in. Let's take a deep breath and retool ourselves for next year. It's not going to go over well. Good luck explaining that strategy to furious Yankee fans and probably players in that locker room on August 2nd if you're not going out, setting that market, and bringing in, even if it's a last gasp gamble, bringing those players in. The sooner, the better. You've known about this problem all year. Don't try to get smart. Don't try to get cute and get the absolute perfect return. Get some kind of return that could be lightning in the bottle for you and can launch you into the wild card race again and get you one of those 3 wild card spots. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about are the Chicago White Sox. Now, they're in a very different situation from the Yankees in that their season's over. Okay. The White Sox will need to pass Detroit, Cleveland, and Minnesota to win the AL Central, which is their only avenue for making the playoffs, is winning the AL Central. It ain't happening, folks. It's just not happening. This has been apparent for several months, if not since the All-Star break and trade deadline of last year. This has been apparent that this team really doesn't have, whether it be the chemistry or the talent, to show more than just occasional flashes of improvement. The White Sox are dirty, and GM Rick Hahn has got to smell that. No worse smell than dirty socks. And that's what is playing on the south side of Chicago right now. Dirty socks. Like with the Yankees, the Chi Sox have been aware of their personnel failures for the majority of this season. So what are the White Sox waiting for? I've always had a lot of faith in team president Ken Williams and GM Rick Hahn's abilities to spot talent. I think they've shown that. When they embarked on the big rebuild about 5 years ago. Chris Sale's departure was really the beginning of those steps toward a rebuild. And it was a painful rebuild at times for White Sox fans. I guess to some degree, I think it was maybe helpful that the Cubs were going through a similar overhaul, so you weren't alone. It wasn't the Cubs being everybody's, warm, fuzzy fan favorites. Both teams in Chicago were struggling, so some of the heat was off a little bit. But for the past 2 years, it seems that the blueprints that they developed for this rebuild, they're for an outhouse, not a penthouse. The Chicago front office knows new designs are needed. And those new designs does not mean a rebuild, but perhaps keeping the features that you can't live without, and then building and reimagining the structure in a more efficient way. Hahn is labeled Luis Robert Jr., Eloy Jimenez, Dylan Cease, and Andrew Vaughn as untouchable. And I agree with the assessment that they've made there. Yes, can you get a lot for Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease? Probably. Vaughn has got years of control, so why would you do that? Luis Robert, we're just starting to see the best of what he can be. I'll even add Michael Kopech to that list, since there's still years of control involved, and I think he still can maximize more of his talent. So I think there's more hope for having Michael Kopech than some of the other pieces we're going to talk about here. But given how the trade market has taken shape, Hahn needs to move now to, again, set the market for not only the first trade chip that you throw into the pot, but for other trade pieces later. Now, you want to wait on Lucas Giolito to squeeze the maximum returns? Okay. I can understand that. It's probably your most valuable piece. But the Dodgers, Red Sox, Diamondbacks, and Reds are already calling on G. Someone will blink, probably the Dodgers, but someone will blink if Hahn gives a hardline ultimatum. It's now or it's never on Giolito. I'm not saying that they're going to keep him with free agency, pending, but I think perhaps a draft pick or letting it go because of what they're getting from Giolito now, it might be worthwhile taking that gamble and maybe getting fewer cents on the dollar if that bluff is not called by, let's say, the Dodgers or the Reds or the Diamondbacks. I could see the Red Sox being very interested in a Lucas Giolito. They have the payroll flexibility where they can try to sign him long term. But okay, so let's say the strategy of keeping Giolito to the very last moments of the trade deadline is a sound one. I don't, but let's just say that one is. Yeah, Lance Lynn. He's the type of veteran arm that can provide quality innings and not get affected by pitching in hitter-friendly environments that some contenders find themselves in. Cincinnati, Houston, even the Yankees, if they're trying to get in it. Texas. Sniff, sniff. Can you smell the desperation in those cities for starting pitching? Hell yeah. So what are you waiting for? Will you potentially get less for Lance Lynn than your reports might tell you could get? Or that people on MLB Network or, Fox pregame are telling you can get? Maybe. But no, turn off sports talk radio for the next couple of weeks and actually just get the deals you need to get done. Kendall Graveman is precisely the type of leverage reliever that contenders are falling all over each other every deadline to add to their bullpen mixes. This year in particular, everybody's going to look to do some kind of upgrade to the bullpen, even teams with great bullpen. Toronto, his former employer, is prime among those teams. Toronto doesn't have as many major league ready pieces, But you can get a major league player or a guy like Matt Lucas, who's just getting, his start in the major leagues and maybe a minor league pitcher or whatever. You can get some nice return for Kendall Graveman if you're beating the bushes and kind of flushing out the GMs that are willing to make a move early. They don't want to wait. They don't want to have that uncertainty of losing out at a deadline. And, the reason I bring up Toronto is that Toronto is guilty of just that every trade deadline. Have they made some great deals? Yes, they have. But more often than not, they're left at the last minute scrambling around trying to get in something for pieces that they just set the price too high on. And they can't afford to do that now. And there's way more teams than Toronto. I just wanted to use that as an example there. Kenyon Middleton may just bring the best return for the White Sox, given that he earns close to the minimum, the league minimum, and he's not going to scare away teams with luxury tax concerns because he's got a very affordable contract that he's working on this year. Yes, it's a rental. Kenyon Middleton could easily be re-signed by whoever acquires him. Or if Middleton is one of those leverage relievers that help you win, keep you in ball games and win you ball games, then whatever price you're paying for him is worth it. He's proven he's fully covered from Tommy John. That's why the Angels let him live. And he does so many things that analytics-driven front offices, which is virtually all of them at this point, they lust for these kind of things that Middleton can bring. He throws hards and he throws strikes. He misses bats. He deuces ground balls. So Middleton might be one of those sneaky, under the radar trade pieces that the White Sox can cash in. And I would think that he's the kind of pitcher that you can move early on. And if you find the buyer that's just a little bit nervous and you take advantage of it. The White Sox aren't going anywhere in 2023. So let's hasten the present suffering, get it over with, and add the pieces the team needs for 2024. Any place lower than the top of the division is still a losing season in the AL Central in 2023. Strike early. Force other teams, whether they be division rivals or other playoff contenders that you're going to have to deal with next year, force them to make a mistake. Force them to tie up money that potentially would mean you would be able to sign a free agent that they now can't. There's more than just, this isn't fantasy baseball or you're in the schoolyard if you're old like me and, flipping cards and offering trades, 3 players for 1, 2 for 2, whatever it would be. Everybody, like trading baseball cards, has their favorites. And for the most part, Rick Hahn is going to know who really covets certain players. Conversations don't only happen in a vacuum from after the All-Star break to the trade deadline. They're ongoing. Go into that little mental file, pull out that card, and make that call and get those pieces that you need. And if you strike early with 1 or 2 of your trade chips, then, okay, clean up in the final 48 hours because there's going to be teams that are going to be left out of what they originally wanted to get. And now suddenly you're in the driver's seat. You have one of the few remaining pieces that are valuable to that team, and you can cash them in then. I threw the Astros into this conversation more because they have the most to gain from acting quickly than any other team, I think, in the American League. There are some teams, the Orioles, just picked up Fujinami from the A's. He's a big monster, 6'6". He's skinny as a rail. I think he's only like 170, 180, but he throws 98, 100. He's that kind of intimidating presence in the bullpen that Mike Elias in Baltimore loves. He wants the hard throwers in his bullpen. The Rangers have already made moves, and they certainly aren't done. every time through the rotation with an upgrade potentially puts you a game further behind the Rangers. Every offer or strikeout with runners in scoring position costs you another game that you have to try to make up somewhere. So with the Astros, it's more a sin of omission than commission. Are they going to make the playoffs with the roster they have? Odds are they are. I would be shocked if they didn't make the playoffs this year. There is more than enough talent, both on the mound and with the bat, that can get the Astros into the playoffs. And then, as the Phillies and so many teams have proven, the Nationals and the Marlins, and you can go down the list. Once you're in the playoffs, then a new season begins. The Astros need to pick up a pitcher, another starting pitcher. The rookies and young kids that they're depending on so far, for the most part, have been very reliable. Many of them pleasant surprises. But when we're talking about going into the playoffs, the Astros need to bring in another arm. I think their bullpen is okay. It wouldn't hurt to bring in a left-hander if you can, because I don't even know if they have an active left-hander in the bullpen. I have to admit, I failed to check. I didn't do my homework before starting to record this. But for most of the season, they've gone with no left-handers in their bullpen. So the Astros need that starter. They need a left fielder or a left-handed bat, if you will. Altuve is going to come back. How healthy will he be when he comes back? That's been a question mark all year. Bregman seems to shine. The brighter the lights that shine on him are. The Pena kid hasn't had the great breakout kind of performance he had last season. But there's a lot of offensive talent on that team. They need at least one more outfield bat. Those outfield bats are out there. My concern is that those outfield bats are going to go pretty quick. And because they're the defending champs, the asking price for Houston might be higher than other teams. So you need to go out early in your first season as GM, and you need to make a statement. We're not settling on our laurels. We're not just saying we're the Astros, come beat us. We're gonna be aggressive in getting those pieces that we need. For the Astros, the second hand is moving and it's ticking away. There may not be a sense of desperation, but imagine the panic that will set in among opponent fan bases and even in some front office if you, as the Astros general manager, strike early and get that rotation piece or get that bat before other teams can react. Other teams are sitting there twiddling their thumbs saying, whoa. The Astros will not miss the playoffs if they don't act soon. They lessen their chances of winning the AL West if they don't go out there and strike first or be among the first to strike for the needs that they have. I mean, Chris Flexen has probably been the only impact starting pitcher that has changed teams after the Mariners DFA'd him, and it's not exactly based on his 2023 performance, a huge addition. The Astros need to move because the Astros are smart enough to recognize there are so many people trying to bid on players that they also covet. They need to go out. They need to not necessarily set the market, but just make an offer that cannot be refused. And then while everybody else is running around the week or days before the deadline, you've already got your pieces in place and you've already gotten the key at bats and you've already gotten the quality start under your belts that help get you a win, while the other teams are hoping they can get the pieces there. We're going to wrap it up for this week. Again, we go around the American League. We pick one story or one player or one trade, ideally, coming up to the trade deadline. Let's talk about from each division. And we're going to do our best to talk about different teams every week, with trade deadline week and the week in the aftermath of the trade deadline. That might be a little hard to kind of keep to that rule. But again, we want to talk about the entire American League. Every team has a story. Last week, we talked about the cellar dwellers. At the time, it was the Red Sox in the East, not the Yankees. But it was the Red Sox, it was the Royals, it was the Athletics. We talked about how coming out of the All-Star break and having a deadline in front of them, how different changes or different things, whether it be just bringing up more prospects or bringing in prospects, or in the case of what was the Red Sox, perhaps, finding a way to get past first the Yankees and then past the Jays and get back into the wild card race. There's always some kind of story going on, and we're going to bring it to you every weekend here on AL Slash Lines. I'm your host, Steve Feck. Don't forget, visit SlasherSports.com for all of our programming options. You can read some wonderful articles on the website, too. I'm going to be doing some Women's World Cup coverage, for Slasher Sports. Christian Rao has previews on just about every FBS team already completed. He's going to start putting those out there, not just league previews, but actual individual team-by-team previews. And with all the changes with NIL and transfer portals, keeping up in the preseason is going to make it so much more enjoyable watching football games come September. So we're here, and we have all kinds of offerings for you. It's not just Slasher Baseball. That's sort of what I will bring to you, but you can get all sorts of just wonderful podcasts and wonderful articles about anything that might interest you in your life right there at SlasherSports.com. We'll be back again next weekend. We'll be pretty much having the trade deadline right in our faces. What teams are going to blink? What teams are going to blow? That could be one of our talking points for next week. But until then, I'm Steve Feck. Thanks for listening.